President of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu. Now, to help us understand that budget as presented is Professor Bongo Adi, a professor of economics at the Lagos Business School. Good afternoon. Welcome to News Track. What are your immediate thoughts on the budget?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me this afternoon. Well, I think the best place to start is to actually deconstruct the budget and then compare it to the previous budgets that we've had in other years. So, to doing that comparison, let's look at the real rather than nominal budget figures. So if we consider the real figures, perhaps we look at it in dollar terms. So the budget of 27.1 trillion naira actually comes to 22.9 billion. If you use the street exchange rate of about $1,180. Naira to the dollar. So that gives you approximately 23 billion dollar budget. And if you look back from 2017, that is actually the lowest budget that we've had in the past almost 6 years now. So in 2022, we had a budget of $27 billion. 2019, 2021, we had $33 billion. So it was in 2016 during the recession that we had a budget of about $19 billion. So you could see that in real terms, the budget numbers are not as big as we as people are making it sound. So yes, there is that ambition to go big on the fiscal side, expansionary fiscal policy. But then if we break it down, there is no expansion there. It's actually a small size budget compared to what we've seen in the country in recent past. Again, I have in the past written on these fiscal issues. I remember publishing an article some years back, which tagged "If so big, why so small?" So Nigeria's economy, used to be the biggest in Africa. I remember that before Buhari came, we had an economy of 538 or $545 billion. But with the exit of Buhari this year, currently, our GDP, our economy shrunk to about $379 billion. So we've lost almost 200. We lost almost 150 to 200 billion dollars in the low-cost years of Buhari's administration. So we now have a strong economy, and then and again we also have a lower sized budget, but we now have higher population. Now, if you break that budget numbers per capita, per head, what that gives per person in Nigeria is about 130,000 naira per annum, which if you convert that to dollars, so you have something about something like $110 per person. So when we compare that to Ghana has $416 per person. A country like South Africa has about $7,000 per person. Libya has $3,000. So Kenya has almost $700 something per person. So Nigeria, that is supposed to be the biggest economy in Africa, has just $110 per person, and then we are boasting that we have an expansionary fiscal policy. It doesn't really fit in. So from that perspective, I don't think we will expect to see any dramatic transformation of the economy from that budget announcement made by the president.
So you wouldn't consider this, sorry, Associate Professor, you wouldn't consider this an ambitious budget then? And are you concerned given the exchange rate currently and the price of oil, that we can fund this budget?
So, like I said, there's no ambition in that budget. And again, looking at the deficit, I think that's where I was heading towards. So if you look at the deficit, I do not want to beat around the bush. I would like to refer to the Argentine case. So I just came out from the class on project finance, and we are dealing with one case on project finance, which deals with Argentina. That's a very recent case, Argentina 2015 through 2018. So Argentina ran a very huge budget deficit, and then the impact on the economy was hyperinflation. Okay, so we are looking at a an economy that is very similar to Nigeria in terms of the macroeconomic fundamentals and the parameters. So Argentina, when they ran a budget, of such a deficit, magnitude of deficit, that really brought upon the economy hyperinflation. So in our own case, probably would be looking at such. And by the way, sorry, there is a mistake there. I am a full professor of economics, not an associate professor, so you need to change that. Okay, so why continue my analysis? Okay, so when you consider that the deficit in the budget, then there is no way we can meet our inflation target, which is to reduce inflation to something about 13% or single digit, as the CBN governor recently hinted at. And then I know that the ambition of the president and his administration is to run, to grow the economy to $1 trillion $1 trillion dollar economy, single digit inflation, interest rates of 9%. Unemployment reduced to less than 7% or thereabout from 33% that it is right now, and an exchange rate of about 600 naira to the dollar. But then with that budget, and we need to understand that budget is very critical in Nigeria. So given the size of the private sector. Now, if you break down our GDP, what you observe is that, given that the GDP of 379 billion, 60% of that is consumption. Okay, investment is only 9%. Even though government spending is 4% of our economy, the contribution of government is 4%, but that is very catalyzing. Because without the roads, without the power, electricity, there is no way that investment can take off. And then there are 5 objectives of fiscal policy. The first one is to grow the economy, which is to boost output. The second one is to create jobs, boost employment. Then equitable distribution of income and wealth. And then debt management, as well as boosting investment. So those are the 5 objectives of fiscal policy. So if you now look at the budget, the way it has been presented, yes, nominally it appears to be big, but then you could see that in real terms we have a very small budget, and then we now have to contend with an economy that has shrunk over the past 8 years. So that is a very big challenge. So I cannot see how that budget can really bring this economy, especially when the ambition, very audacious target that the president and his administration has set for themselves is to have a $1 trillion say in the next 4 years or thereabout. So if we break that 1 trillion, so which means that we need to have about, say 20% of that this year alone. But that budget doesn't, from the way it is, I cannot see that target we can't even waffle at it.
The borrowing plan of the federal government has come under some scrutiny lately. Now it's told us an updated external borrowing plan of $8.6 billion and 100 million euros for critical infrastructure. That's towards the socio-economic development of the country.
Well, I have no problem with borrowing. Yes, we definitely have to live with the consequences of borrowing, which is hyperinflation. But can that be managed using monetary policy tools? Yes, it is possible to manage that. Do we need such borrowing? We really need it because we can't manufacture anything from air. We can't manufacture infrastructure that we have. Currently, the infrastructure deficit in Nigeria is $221 billion. As far back as 2012, our total infrastructure stock stood at about 25 to 30% of our GDP. You know, given what has transpired in the past 8 years, in the past 10 years, the infrastructure stock has fallen to less than 10% of the GDP. So you cannot power an economy, you cannot grow the GDP with an infrastructure stock of just 10% of GDP. It's just like you're trying to power the whole of Channels TV, where you are, shooting from with just, in Nigerian parlance, I pass my neighbor generator. It doesn't take you anywhere. So we need to grow the stock of infrastructure that we have, because that's the only way we can boost investment, which will now create the jobs that we want to have, and then increase our incomes, increase our per capita income, and of course, help us to also manage the deficit. So the way out is to borrow. But then I think what Nigerians should be concerned with is how government, deals with this borrowing. And again, so some people may say, but why not bring in the private sector? But that's a very big issue. So we are like, caught between the devil and the WC. So given the macroeconomic parameters, the fundamentals that everybody knows, there is no way you're going to raise funds from the international capital market, a fund, fund that is cheap. So when they factor in the risk, so once they factor in the risk inherent in the system, the interest rates, on whatever loans anybody wants to take out to do any sort of infrastructure project in Nigeria will hit the roof. And then eventually such project will not be viable from the, and again, even if it is, it will not be affordable to the people. So meaning that government, so the onus still falls on the government to give us that infrastructure. So if that be that they have to borrow, then they have to do that. They need to do that. Okay, so we have a big economy. We need big budgets. So if we have to borrow a whole lot of money to transform our economy, build the necessary infrastructure, in order to kickstart and catalyze investment, so be it. But then we need to be concerned about how the funds are managed. When they borrow the funds, what do they do with it? Who's responsible for it? So we need to change the entire system, the mechanism for the delivery of public goods in Nigeria. It shouldn't just be something for the government MDAs alone. So they need to really come up with creative ways to ensure that there is transparency, there is accountability, in the way those funds are utilized in delivering infrastructure.
And then we look forward, obviously, to the breakdown of the budget estimates from the federal government for further analysis. We thank you, Associate Professor Bongo Adi of Economics of the Lagos Business School, for being with us. Associate Professor.
No, I'm not an associate professor. I am a professor of economics.
Thank you. A professor of economics, I do beg your pardon, Lagos Business School. Thank you for being as a part of the program this afternoon.
You're welcome.